I think the time of COVID has taught us more than anything to be flexible and to expect the uninspected. And at 20 past 10, I get a phone call from one of the organisers, the event organisers, discussing a number of things. And then they suddenly said, "What are you doing at 11:30? To which I said, "Well, why?" And they explained that Sarah had been taken ill very suddenly, and they needed somebody to step into this session. And would I do it? And I'm here. So welcome to this session. I'm going to be talking about, and I've just realised I've not put my slides up, so I'll do that for you now. So I'm going to be talking about multi and multi-unit franchising as a subject matter. And I suppose to give you a quick background of me and who I'm about so that you can understand where I'm coming from. So I'm currently the master franchisee for Body Street here in the UK and in Ireland. I've also been a franchisee and was GM for a major franchise network here in the UK that had the master franchise as part of a global structure, and was European operations director for that company as well. And as I suppose you always get a minute to promote, so Body Street, we are a fitness concept. So we've been affected by, like most people, with the COVID scenario. But we're a fitness concept slightly different. We're a once a week, 20-minute workout that is equivalent to going to the gym 3 times a week. So we are great for those people who either hate the gym or are just too busy to get a regular exercise. Because I say our once a week, 20-minute workout is the same as 3 sessions. So we're currently 9 studios here in the UK, just over 300 across Europe, and it's a German concept. So that's, I suppose, my background. And I suppose the other thing very quickly is that I've spent about the last 8 years helping people considering franchising follow the appropriate steps for franchising their business. Primarily in the UK, but I've some international experience as a British Franchise Association accredited franchise consultant. So that's a sort of my background and where I'm coming from. So what I want to talk to you about is as I touched on, the reasons and the sort of 10 points to think about when either being a master franchisee, a franchisee, or you're looking to master or franchise your business internationally. And I think the first thing that you should always consider is why. Stephen Covey, in his books, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, The 7 Habits, says, begin with the end in mind. What are you trying to achieve? Why are you trying to achieve it? What's your game plan? What's your goal plan? Where are you trying to get to? Why are you really going international? Is it because there's the demand for what it is that you're doing internationally? Or, and a little bit tongue-in-cheek, you've had an email from somebody somewhere in the world that you never even thought about that said, they love your business and can they buy the franchise, please? Is it ego that's driving it, or is it demand? And I think that's really important, that number one is why. Why are you doing it? And once you've figured that out, is where? Which parts of the world are you going to expand to? How are you going to do it? What are the legal obligations? What are the tax obligations? There are withholding tax requirements in certain countries. So while you think you're getting all of your management service fees out, actually there may be systems and legislation that actually mean that you can't get all of the money that you thought you were going to get from mastering into that country. How are you going to support that master? What are you going to do about language? Who's going to be responsible for having the operations manual in the language of that country? And what translates, and I don't necessarily mean in language, but which part of your business translates? I remember sitting down when I was working with as the GM of a franchise, and part of the model was that we vinyled, so that the windows were fully vinyled. And I asked the question why, and I was told because that's what you have to do. This is part of our brand. It's part of our brand culture. It's what we do, and you have to do it. And one of the challenge with that is because in the UK, a vinyl window is a barrier to females going into a shop. It's a well-known retail fact that women will not go into a shop where they can't see out, or people out can't see in. They don't feel safe. And I sort of drilled down to understand why this vinyling was so important. And I got this sort of standard, it's a part of the brand, it's part of this, it's part of that. But actually, when it came down to it, the head office was in Sydney in Australia, where it's normally 40-something degrees. And it's one of the ways of keeping the building cool in an affordable way. So here was a brand insisting that something was done into the UK, which was, we look into the summer that we are approaching now, and the trees around me are about to get blown over. Clearly it didn't translate. So, you know, what are the sacred cows within your brand? And what of those sacred cows are going to, there's a great book called Sacred Cows Make the Finest Burgers. Which elements are you prepared to walk away from as not being vital, and which are? And then an important question is are you going to invest? So as the master of the business, the franchisor, the master franchisor, are you going to invest? I don't know, somebody's got their mic not on mute. If you could do me a favor and just check and send that down. We've got a lot of squelching coming over. Thank you. So are you going to invest? Are you going to help the master franchisee in the territory? Are you going to put the pilot in there? How are you going to invest in that model? Or are you just looking for somebody to part with a significant chunk of change to buy your franchise and then operate it there in their country? And for me, one of the vital parts of making the decision I made about the franchise that I bought the master rights for was the fact that we had an agreement in place that would allow us to part fund with the master franchisor the operation here in the UK, because I thought it was right, because it was a brand new market in a brand new area. So that's what we agreed, and it worked very, very well for us, where we then obviously have the rights to then buy back out. So there's some, 4 very important questions to consider when thinking about mastering your business. But as becoming a master franchisee, you've got some similar sort of questions to think about. And I think the first question that you should always consider is, if that concept isn't here in your country now, why isn't it? Isn't it because somebody's not thought about it? Or is it because actually there's no call for it whatsoever? And I say that with a little bit of care, because I remember reading years ago a story of 2 salesmen who went to Africa many, many years ago. And the first salesman wrote back to the head office asking what on earth was going through the minds of the people who sent him to go and sell shoes in Africa when nobody was wearing shoes. The second salesman wrote back to the head office thanking them so much for sending them to Africa, because the opportunity was massive, because nobody was wearing shoes. So I think it's always be careful how you think about that. But why isn't it working, or why isn't it operating in the country you're in? And that's really why you need to sort of establish an understanding, and that's where your business planning and your due diligence comes in. And I think the other thing to really remember is, just because the brand is established in its home country or its home territory, you remember you're going to have to develop the brand awareness there. Now, there is a huge benefit, and I can relate that with what we do at Body Street. And it was something I didn't really think about until I became actually started operating Pilot. There's the fact that we can go back and trade on the heritage is really important. So one of the questions, because we do use a thing called electromuscle stimulation, and because it's different, people are a little concerned. I could relate back to the fact in Germany, there's 45,000 people who train every week, and we've never had an accident, and that allowed us to trade on the back of it. So understanding why and how. And I think the next thing is having a development plan and a development agreement. And that's really important to have that discussed and negotiated up front with your master franchisor. That development plan is not only how many units you're going to open, and I think you need to be very careful when considering, especially in a new area, and if you are the first master franchisee, of understanding the development process and how many territories you're going to open. But also, I think it's important to have in that development plan an understanding from both parties. I touched on it when I was talking about the master franchisor. But as a master franchisee, having the right to be able to develop certain elements of the business to change the model. A good example for us is, again, in Body Street, where the studios are very visual, all ground floor, lots of glass, which is beautiful. But obviously trying to find that type of property in London is really difficult. And it was part of the standard of the business was that we had to have this type of setup, this type of premises. Well, we managed to negotiate through the proving of how unaffordable that was, that actually first floor or basement studios would be appropriate for the model. So what are the things that you need to think about adaptations or having the right to have adaptations in that development plan? It's really, really important. And then obviously the next thing is to think about, with becoming the master franchisee, is all about piloting. Who's going to pilot the concept? Are you going to pilot it? And if so, what training do you need and what team do you need and how are you going to do it? If not, why not? If you're going to buy the master rights to a territory and then expect franchisees to be your pilots, that's expecting an awful lot. And I know every case, you can have a general rule, which means that everybody can negotiate, or everybody can argue their specific case. But I would err on the side of caution if your development plan includes you buying the master rights and then not piloting it yourself, especially if you've got an aggressive growth plan, because you've got to find somebody who's going to be the first. And one of the things that people get wrong about franchising is what motivates and what drives a franchisee. Believe it or not, the number one reason why people buy a franchise is perceived low risk. And if you're asking somebody to pilot a concept that's never been piloted, never been operated in a territory, you're looking for a very unique person. So I would just really would caution you on that. So what about being a multi-franchisee? Interesting, in multi-franchising, it was very much, until recently, it's been very much a taboo concept in the UK. It's very standard in America, and it makes a lot of sense. But one of the questions you need to think about is do you stay within the same sector? So if you are a food franchisee, do you expand in other food concepts, or do you diverse? And I do know, I was talking to a very well established food franchise operator in the chicken business, and they've just gone into the fitness industry. And one of the reasons they went into that is they found themselves exposed They'd also had a burger businesses. They found themselves very exposed when BSC came along, and they realized they didn't want to be in a position whereby if a specific situation happened in their industry, and it's going through my mind about COVID-19 now, and I'm thinking they're in the restaurant and the fitness industry, so God help them. But yeah, so do you say specific or do you diverse? Equally, what's in your franchise agreement? Because if you've got a franchise agreement that requires you to have full time and attention in the franchise you're in, how does that allow you to then have multiple franchises? So that's clearly a thing to think through, and how you're going to do that. And then obviously, what does that mean to the talent pool you have at the moment? So your operations team you have at the moment, your area managers, etc. If you're a large multi franchisee, how are you going to grow your business to support multiple units? It's not. The mistake most people make is going from 1 to 2. So from 1 unit to 2 units, because they assume that 1 + 1 = 2. In my experience, 1 + 1 = 1.4. As in, you get 1.4 times the turnover, you get 1.4 times the profitability, but you get almost twice the cost. So if you want to double your profitability, you need 3. And I was taught years ago, you multiple 1, 3, 7, 49. So what talent pool do you have at the moment, and how are you going to support those units as you open them? And how are you going to grow and train and develop those people so that they become less operational and more support? Or does the master provide that support for you? And the other thing is, I'm sorry, is does it give you the ability to maximize the location? So if you are in a specific area, can you maximize? Because I think, one of the mistakes that people will make is they've got a food business in Manchester, they've got a dessert parlor in Glasgow, they've got a fitness studio in Margate, and it's all over the place. Where can you maximize the area? And maximize what you're looking to do. So that's my sort of 10 points that I sort of thought were really good to share. I think we most probably have an opportunity to answer any questions if there are, and I've seen a few things flashing. But I hope you've got a flavor there and some really important questions to ask yourself. And for me, the important question is why? What are you trying to achieve? What's your objective? What's your strategy? And what's your end game?